Honorable ambassadors, dear members of DEİK, dear guests, welcome and thank you for joining us for the DEİK EU talks on the future of Turkey and EU relations. We are very honored to host Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Director for EU Affairs, Ambassador Faruk Kaymakçı, and Head of EU Delegation to Turkey, Ambassador Berger. Mr. Minister, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for making the time to join us today. We really appreciate your presence, and I hope it will be a fruitful webinar today. First of all, I would like to congratulate Mr. Ambassador Berger on his new post and extend our gratitude for his contribution to development of Turkey-EU relations. So I certainly believe that he's living with good memories from Turkey, and this is the same from our side. And now I would like to start with some brief introductions on the European Business Council and its activities. As you know, we represent about 60% of Turkey's leading businesses, many of which have extensive ties with the EU. And the European Business Council, which I chair and is hosting this meeting today, consists of 37 business councils and carry out activities for the advancement of Turkey-EU relations from a business perspective. These include bringing business people together with the EU representatives and organizing informative events, as we are having one of them today, and coordinating the activities towards the EU with the aim of having a united voice in Brussels. Of course, we cooperate with many NGOs also in Turkey who are dealing with EU relations. At this pivotal time, I believe that for Europe and Turkey, in line with DEİK's business diplomacy motto, we aim to gather some insights on the direction of the EU's future. Turkey-EU relations and potential areas for further cooperations are heading in. So, dear Ambassador, dear Minister, and dear guests, we have been witnessing that the international system has been going through a major transformation in the last couple of years. Although the underlying reasons are subject to a different discussion, I believe that there is one word characterizing such a change. It is uncertainty. This uncertainty leads to tectonic shifts in balance of power and change in trade blocs, and countries also are prioritizing short-term interests over long-term strategic partnership. This is seen in international relations as well. As the phrase goes, all that is solid melts into air now. So in such a liquid context, COVID-19 came as a catalyst. Despite its devastating effects in terms of public health and world economy, I have a lot of questions for Mr. Minister and Mr. Ambassador. And as we proceed, I'm sure there will be questions from our audience as well. With the accelerator effect of COVID-19, Turkey and the EU are sailing in uncharted waters, and both parties find themselves focusing on the agenda of the past, but obviously with a different context. So in a sense, they are back to the future, and there are a lot of questions in all minds, including us. With the webinar, we aim to dive deeper in these questions. These include the accession negotiations, modernization of customs union, and visa liberalization as the usual suspects that we are dealing for many years. And obviously, importance of strategic sectors that Europe now is working on, and how we can deep dive on these sectors in our business relationship. Obviously, there are some undiscovered opportunities, so we would like to talk about those if there is any. And migration deal, unfortunately, it's on the agenda and it will stay for a longer time. So what is the latest situation? And everybody is looking forward for the outcome of future of the EU. So we would like to know about what is the prospects out of this discussions, and what is the implication for Turkey. And obviously we are living in a connected world, so global outlook is very important. So how it will affect the trade blocks, especially EU and emerging markets. So and last but least, agenda is the German presidency of the EU, which Turkey is looking forward. What will be the impact on Turkish-EU relations? So finally, the EU priorities and cooperation areas also, which always been an importance for the business community, R&D and the innovation. So Mr. Minister and Mr. Ambassador and dear guests, as representatives of Turkish business community, we think that there is no better time to refocus on our relations that are working, effective, and with substantial results. We believe that today's discussion with our distinguished speakers will be a major contribution to this end, since Mr. Ambassador and Mr. Minister are very much experienced in EU relations. So now, without further ado, I would like to start with the first question. So my first question will be for Mr. Minister. From your perspective, what would be the implications of COVID-19 on the future of Turkey-EU relations? And given the stalemate of the last years, how the new normal is likely to reflect on the usual suspects of Turkey-EU relations, namely accession negotiations, modernization of custom unions, and visa liberation dialogue? So can we start with you, Mr. Minister, if you may?
Of course. Thank you very much. Sevgili Zeynep Hanım, dear Christian, and dear friends, dear business world in Turkey and in the rest of Europe. Zeynep Hanım, you asked me a question, I think, whose answer would take at least 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because it's a big question. But let me try to be brief. Maybe, let me, provide some sort of introduction, and then we can go into details. Of course, as you mentioned, the pandemic, has affected the world, Europe, and also Turkey. And to answer your question, I think I would say that the pandemic has brought Turkey and the rest of Europe closer. And during the initial phase of the pandemic, EU leaders and Turkish leaders, they talked to each other, to find solution and to tackle the problems that we faced at the beginning of this crisis. So I would say that the pandemic has brought us closer. But of course, during the pandemic, we faced different problems that we need to tackle now. We see, for example, unilateralism, prevailing in many European countries, even in Turkey. So we have seen unilateral actions by countries which are affecting our, let's say, regional, global trade and global relations. So I think we have to bring back the multinationalism. We have to bring back, again, the rule-based system. Otherwise, I think we will trust each other less and less, which is a worrying sign. And again, in the first, I would say, few weeks of the crisis, not only Turkey, but also many EU countries and candidate countries, they turned, they became inward-looking countries. Everyone wanted to take unilateral action, and they actually closed the borders, they stopped the flights, not really informing the other partners. So this is also something that we need to tackle. The Schengen system has not been still back fully. And of course, Turkey-EU contacts, are now a bit problematic because we have to have Turkish citizens being able to travel to Schengen zone, but also EU citizens should be able to come to Turkey easily. There we have some problems. But also, after the pandemic, I think we should expect more problems in our common neighborhood. So we have already some conflicts in Syria, in Libya, in some parts of North Africa, and also in some parts of Asia. And when we combine all these conflicts with the pandemic, I think we should expect more irregular migration, more, flow of people, I mean, towards Turkey and the rest of Europe. Then we have also Russia and China, becoming more and more assertive in the world scene. And also, I think, in the post-pandemic era, we might see, Russia and China, being assertive and using its one country policy. Because for the EU to function quickly, I think we need a common decision, which might take some time. Even if the common decision is taken in the implementation, we see some divisive actions by the member states. But when it comes to China and Russia, they are able to implement their decision quickly. So there, I think we need to act, quickly and decisively. You mentioned, different issues of Turkey-EU relations, which can be summarized in the 18 March statement. The 18 March statement actually tackles almost all aspects of Turkey-EU relations, from accession to update of the customs union, from visa liberalization to counter-terrorism, from regular dialogues to migration management. So, as you mentioned, after the visit of President Erdogan to Brussels on the 9th of March, where he and the EU leaders agreed to somehow revitalize the 18 March statement, and we hope that we can do this, but EU is not acting fast right now on the 18 March statement. One argument from the EU side is that drilling activities in the Eastern Mediterranean is one excuse that the EU can use against Turkey right now, not to accelerate the work. I think the second argument is that we do not see a direct impact of irregular migration right now because of the coronavirus, because pandemic has stopped, if you like, the mobility of the people to great extent. So we do not see a huge wave of irregular migration for the time being, but I am afraid that within 2-3 months' time, when we see, harsh impacts of pandemic, we will see again a bigger wave of irregular migration, and not only from Syria or Libya, but also from other countries, African countries, Asian countries, where we might have economic problems. I don't know, there is something going on in the screen. I hope you still hear me. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So, of course, the pandemic has also created its own problem. For example, you mentioned visa liberalization. Now, of course, we have a difficulty in terms of mobility, because even within the Schengen area, EU countries are not opening up quickly. So we have to make sure that people can travel safely, and people, are aware of the restrictions that we should follow in terms of tackling the pandemic. So this is an area where we have some problems. But of course, you mentioned the agenda of the past. The agenda of the past is also the agenda of the future. But in addition to this, we need to work on health more closely. And I hope that, Turkey and the EU health system will be closer from now on, because, our health is common. Our health policies are affecting us directly. And of course, Turkish health system showed a strong resilience and strong capacity during the crisis. And even before the EU itself, Turkey has been able to answer the request of at least 22 member states and candidate countries in terms of their request for medical staff, medical equipment. And we hope that we can build on this. And we have also seen the importance of agriculture, I think, during this crisis. And the customs union, for the time being, does not include all agricultural products. And this also gives us some sort of sign that the future customs union should also include agricultural products, not only processed agricultural products, but also agricultural products, because Turkish agriculture is a healthy, organic, strong agriculture. Of course, we have the pesticide problem we have to tackle with, but Turkey is a big agricultural country as well. And there, I think I see a huge potential. Logistics, again, is an area where, you know, we can work, and the supply chains of Europe have been affected during the crisis. And of course, Turkey can play a key role again in terms of supply chains, in terms of logistics to the rest of Europe. And this is an area where I think we can also make progress. You mentioned, I mean, of course, very briefly, the immediate sector is, of course, tourism. I think we have to open up to each other, and we have to make sure that the measures which are taken in Turkey and in the rest of Europe are solid and good. And we have to reactivate tourism immediately. As you might have heard, the European Commission has suggested a list of countries which can have access to Schengen zone. Unfortunately, this list, for the time being, does not include candidate Turkey. And we believe that this list should include Turkey, because our health figures are really good. Our infrastructure in health are good. Turkey is a part of customs union. So if you include 18 million Western Balkan countries, and if you do not include Turkey, I think this would not be fair, and this would not be in line with the spirit of the customs union, because our business people will need to travel to customs union countries, and they should be able to do so easily. And of course, when it comes to numbers, you know, we have 10 million passports, and we have only less than 1 million visa to Schengen zone. So we are not talking about a big number. And for example, the 6 Western Balkan countries altogether, they are 18 million. And 18 million of them, except Kosovars, they can travel to EU without visa. But when it comes to Turkey, although we are 82 million, we are talking about, you know, less than 1 million, you know, passports. So I think you should take a positive decision as soon as possible. And in terms of data, we have started, I think, recording Turkey's health data within the World Health Organization system. And also our Ministry of Health is in contact with the European Center for Disease Control. So basically, we hope that things will go in the positive direction. And also, when it comes to EU citizens coming to Turkey, our doors are open, and Turkey has taken the necessary measures. So we hope that Turkey is a safe country. Turkey has a strong health structure, and especially in Antalya, in Muğla, you know, the number of cases COVID-19 is really limited, and you know, the region has full potential to accommodate millions of tourists from different parts of the world. So I think, you know, before the summer season ends, I think we should accelerate our efforts in terms of revitalizing the tourism sector, tourism industry, as quickly as possible, and this is important. Maybe just one word on the German presidency. We are hopeful that, you know, as a founding and strong member of the EU, Germany will take some strong action in terms of advancing Turkey-EU relations, not only in terms of the customs union, but also in terms of Turkey's accession perspective, but also, counter-terrorism efforts and Turkey-EU high-level dialogue. So we hope that we can see some positive results during the German presidency. I don't know whether I should go to innovation, other things that you mentioned, or shall I wait? And I don't know. Zeynep Hanım, what do you suggest? Shall I continue? Do you still have?
I think it's better that we start also with Mr. Ambassador, with the same question. So to hear his opinion on these issues, and then we'll continue with the other issues. I think I had some questions in my mind regarding the agriculture, health, etc. But you already mentioned a little bit while you were explaining the situation in Turkey. But we will go hopefully deeper on that. But I think maybe Mr. Ambassador can contribute also as well. So we'll go with other questions.
Zeynep, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation, and it's great to be here with Faruk. So I don't really have much to say on your question, because I think Faruk really covered it extremely well, and many of the points that he made, I would have made very similarly. But let me perhaps again thank DEİK for all this cooperation that we have had in the last few years, and with you here, and also with Mustafa in Brussels. I think this is a very important bridge between the European Union and Turkey, and I think it's a strong bridge. And we have crossed this bridge many times with great ideas, good ideas, and good cooperations. I'm really very, very happy with that. You mentioned a few things that are quite important. You mentioned a couple of very broad things. One, the uncertainty, and I think that's quite an important issue to consider. We at the moment, and you also indicated that we still deal with old issues, and we should really look forward to new issues. And I think you're quite right. This uncertainty will, unfortunately, I'm afraid, will stay with us for a little while, but particularly this uncertainty, how we organize our daily lives, how we organize our engagement. And we should, however, not lose the sight that this uncertainty also provides some opportunities. Opportunities for business, for commerce, for trade, opportunities that are linked up with what the European Commission is planning on the Green Deal, but also on the digital transformation of the economy. These were all ideas that were around already in December last year, so before Corona actually hit us hard. And therefore, and they were reconfirmed just in March. That these are still two very big projects which come actually quite timely in response to this Corona. Now, a couple of points I would like to make. First of all, to underline that health issues in Europe are a competency of the member states. And member states at the beginning of the crisis reacted, of course, very fast, and had to react depending on their epidemiological data and the development in their countries. But very quickly it was understood that we need to have the European Union as union with the member states and the institutions to respond to the crisis and to respond to the economic fallout of the crisis and the measures that were taken to protect our health systems. So this new concept of Team Europe was created, member states together with the institutions, and it's not only in cooperation among the member states, but also cooperation with our partners, and of course, foremost, Turkey, as part of the customs union, is a very important and key partner in keeping the economies alive or revitalizing the economy. So there are many, many different things that we can talk about, how we are going to do this, because there are a lot of strategic opportunities, not only challenges, but also opportunities. And some of them you have already mentioned. Just before coming to you, to this conference, we had a conference this afternoon on with Digital Europe and the Digital Turkey platform on the digitalization of the economy. So the technology is a key element, and Turkey is in a very, very good position. Turkey has a very young, very technology savvy workforce, has the infrastructure, has the development, the technology. Turkey could serve as a technology and transformation hub. So there are many opportunities for the Turkish industry and for Turkish commerce to jump on this bandwagon and to work on this digital transformation of the economy, both in Turkey and in Europe. The other one, Faruk referred to it, is the supply chain. Yes, Turkey is part of the customs union, and that gives a perfect opportunity for strengthening the supply chain. I mean, there are many products, many strategic products that come at the moment from areas outside the customs union, outside the EU, outside Turkey, in Southeast Asia, and even further afield. It has nothing to do with the countries themselves. It has to do with the distance. So anything can happen. Another crisis can hit us. The supply chains can be interrupted. The transportation can be interrupted. Companies have to shut down. Workforce cannot go to work and produce. So I think this is yet another strategic opportunity for Turkey to attract businesses that are currently outside the customs union, outside the European Union, to relocate to Turkey because they are closer and closer linked up with the rest of the supply chain. Again, Faruk mentioned health. I think what we have seen, this is one of the lessons learned from the crisis, we need to rely on a resilient and strong health system. And I think both in Europe and in the European Union, the member states of the European Union and in Turkey, there was the fear at the beginning of the crisis that our health system would not be able to cope with the onslaught of the cases. I mean, people falling sick and people need either hospitalization or even intensive care. I mean, we were lucky it was not that bad after all, because the systems were resilient enough, and I think that's a message. We need to have resilient health systems. And Turkey is a good example. European countries are good examples. There are other examples around the world where it was not that good, but also the economy needs to be resilient, and the social network needs to be resilient. We have seen in other countries where people are falling between the cracks. They are losing their jobs. They have no health insurance. They have no unemployment insurance. Again, a very important lesson. So these are a number of opportunities, strategic opportunities, or strategic lessons that we need to learn. You talked about the outstanding issues, and Faruk gave you already a few answers where we are in our discussions. Yes, President Erdogan was in Brussels on the 9th of March. And the three presidents, so President Erdogan, President Michel, and President von der Leyen, agreed that we look into the implementation of the 2016 statement. In all its components, and we still do this. Yes, we have not really progressed very far, because on the European side, one important aspect we need to make progress internally is the aspect of finance. As you may know, I mean, all our listeners I think know pretty much about the European Union. So we are in the middle of a discussion about the next 7 years of financing in the European Union, so-called the so-called MFF. So we need to see the outcome of that before we can be more concrete. But one thing is very clear, from a political point of view, from an operational point of view, we see the burden that Turkey is carrying when it comes to migration, the additional burden compared to 2016. We speak about double the number of people inside the country and more people arriving, but not only Syrians, others as well. So this is very much understood in Europe. And from a political point of view, I think the message has been very clear from the Commission President down to the Vice President who was in Turkey in December, and to Mr. Michel and others, that we need to continue this cooperation and support to Turkey when it comes to migration. Yes, I think Faruk is quite right. One of the obstacles moving forward is the situation in Eastern Mediterranean, because ultimately, whatever we want to do, also with the 2016 statement, the big issues, the big tickets, that's customs union, visa liberalization, accession process, more finances. We need the support of member states and all member states. So the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, I'm afraid, has an effect on the discussion that we're having at the moment. But I hope there is the political will to overcome this, and so we can also move on with other issues. You asked about the global outlook. And I think one of the lessons that we have seen of the last few weeks and the last few months is this cooperation, coordination among countries, is the solidarity among countries, but not only. It's also upholding multilateral institutions, multilateral trade institutions like the WTO, like the United Nations on the political side. I think Turkey and the European Union, we are on the same page here. We fully agree that those structures that were set up after 1945, after the Second World War, are actually those structures that guarantee our prosperity and stability. And we need to continue working with those structures and upholding the structures, despite the fact that measures have been taken by some partners to weaken the structures like WTO. So here, Turkey and the European Union certainly work very closely together. My last point on the German presidency. Faruk is quite right. Important country. We hope they take many of the European agenda points forward, the big issues. But the most important issue at the moment is to get the economies back on their feet. So the German contribution in this discussion is very important. The German contribution in cooperation with the other member states is here very important. And you know, the European Commission, the President of the European Commission has presented a big package at the European Parliament in addition to other components. So the total amount that we are foreseeing for helping the European economies to get back on their feet is about 4 trillion euros. Component of a combination of loans and grants, a combination of the European Central Bank buying up securities, the European Investment Bank supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, the European Commission supporting various sectors of the economy, but also working on the necessary legislation and regulations that are needed for doing this. So, in a nutshell, this for me are the points I wanted to make in response to your very general question that you posed at the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It was a very good introduction from both of our speakers. And as I took note while you were speaking, you both mentioned the role of multilateralism and the customs union for securing the supply chains. I think is very important. So, of course, there are big tickets like customs union, visa liberalization, and migration issues. You both mentioned in a nutshell, but I think now we should little bit deep dive on these issues, and without question, I think this is a vital for our interconnected world, the customs union, as COVID-19's effect on the world economy is expected to be $9 trillion, and recently Mr. Ambassador mentioned that there is another package with loans, grants, etc., close to 4 trillion euros. So getting back on feet will be a challenge for both Turkey and the EU. So in such an atmosphere, modernizing the customs union can be the antidote we need. And what do you think? And I would like to ask you with one word, is there a time projection for the modernization of the customs union? Because I think Minister mentioned about the unilateralism and the risk that we are having in the world relations, etc. So multilateralism, as you mentioned, is the way to go, and obviously us as Turkey and the Europe has to withhold with this idea and the way of designing the future. And of course the institutions are very important. So what is your with this comment that you made a while ago, what is your let's say idea about this customs union? Because there are also some signs that Europe also is also sometimes trying to go further with the quick wins. So I don't know which one would you like to take first the floor, Mr. Minister, Mr. Ambassador. My question is to both of you. So I don't know who would like to start first.
Faruk's mic is still off, so let me start. Customs union, and I think it's no secret, the European Commission proposed a mandate to the member states in December 2016 to start negotiations on the update of the customs union on the basis of evaluations by the World Bank and our own evaluations and the evaluation of Turkish trade institutions. And the evaluations all point in the same direction. A modernization of this customs union would be a win-win, economic win-win. And as you know, there are certain areas of trade and relations that are not covered by the current customs union. Faruk already mentioned agriculture, fresh agriculture project, not industrial products. Secondly, services, and thirdly, public procurement. And there are also questions regarding dispute settlement procedures, but there's also this question that Turkey is very, very concerned about, is the relationship between the customs union and third countries, in case we were to sign free trade arrangements with any third country. So these are very important aspects, and I think the Commission and the institutions all agree that this is a very important step that we need to take. Now, in the meanwhile, political obstacles are in the way that have prevented this mandate from being granted by the member states. And we are now reaching a moment, I think, where considerations are being undertaken among the member states to think about the current customs union, which has accumulated over the last few years, but particularly lately, what we call trade irritants. So I think a few things have happened, and you would I'm sure Faruk will tell me on both sides, both on the European Union side and on the Turkish side, a few things have happened that we need to address because they have really undermined the implementation of the current customs. This is ranging from additional tariffs. This is continuing with non-tariff barriers as well regarding certain qualifications, documentation, and disclosure of information, and going to the safeguards on steel, to many other aspects that in some we can see a deterioration of the current customs union. Therefore, some people will argue we need to fix these irritants and then maybe move on, and other people will argue, why not do this all in one go? Let's start with the modernization of the customs union. Let's also address the existing problems or the problems that have arisen lately. That's where we are. So I think this is also where the expectations are in the German presidency, because customs union and the debate about the customs union is taking part in working groups in the European Council, which are led by the rotating presidency. So Germany will have to play a very strong role there. But I can only tell you from the institutions' point of view, from the trade community, from the ones, the bilateral trade organizations that I speak with, there's a strong wish and to have this modernization of the customs union undertaken as quickly as possible. So, as I said, there are political obstacles that need to be addressed, but once they're done, I think everything speaks in favor of this. And in light of what has happened lately with Corona and with this need for greater multilateralization and cooperation, I also personally believe it is certainly would be a very positive aspect also in the relationship between Turkey and the European Union.
Thank you. Yes, I believe also this is important because you talked about, while you spoke, the digitalization, policies in Europe, and Turkey having a very savvy tech, population, and also the importance of supply chain. I think since the modernization of customs union will give us the opportunity also to work on the services and other issues. I think it will be a very important step for deepening both sides' economic relations. So, Mr. Minister, what is your comment on these issues?
Yes, thank you very much, Zeynep Hanım. I agree with most of the points mentioned by Christian, but I would like to add, few points. One is, Christian mentioned that this is economically win-win situation, but I think it is also politically win-win situation because now we have two issues. One is about the drilling in the Eastern Mediterranean. The second issue is the political developments in Turkey. So these are the excuses of some of the member states. But even if we want to make progress in these two areas, I think we should give a green light to the update negotiations, because update negotiations for the customs union will not be completed within weeks. So it will take probably months, if it is not years. So we have time, and why we are not creating a positive environment by saying that, okay, let's start these negotiations. I think this will completely change the negative message that we receive from the rest of Europe and from the EU. And I think it will also help, the reformists and all the people who talk about progress in Turkey to accelerate the reform process. So it can also create a positive momentum on the issue of Cyprus, for example, if this is the obstacle. So I think instead of, waiting who is going to make the first move, I think we should start already the update negotiations. I mean, to some extent, we can understand the politicization of this issue, but over-politicization of the update negotiations is not helpful to anyone. And it's a lose-lose situation. And also, how are we going to recover, after the pandemic? I think customs union is one of the answers. So we have a limited customs union, as you all know. It's industrial products and processed agricultural products. So if we can extend this to, for example, to agriculture fully, if we can have public procurement, if we can have energy, if we can have services partially or fully, with some transitional periods, for example, I think it will really create a big impact, because Turkey is not any country in Europe. Turkey is a big economy. It's the fifth or sixth biggest economy in Europe. And we have a huge trade volume. So any progress, I think, in this trade relation will create, a huge impact, a positive impact on the economies of Turkey and the EU. So pandemic is one point why we should accelerate the update negotiations. But the other argument, as Christian mentioned, the irritants. We have non-tariff barriers against each other, because I think people are losing the hope, both in Turkey and on the EU side, saying that we will not have this customs union update soon. So we should try to protect ourselves by unilateral actions. It's not only the Turkey side, but also the EU side having unilateral actions. Unfortunately, as trade partners, we are, having, for example, issues at the WTO between Turkey and the EU on steel and aluminum. We have, for example, a localization issue with pharmaceuticals. And I think this doesn't really match the spirit of partnership in trade between Turkey and the EU. And this is why I think we should really take an urgent decision to start the update negotiations. So as soon as we start the negotiations, we can focus on the irritants. We can already solve many problems, because we need to build trust. And so basically, EU has the upper hand here. I think EU can make the way, and let's start the update negotiations. So if you want to discuss some political issues, some foreign policy issues, we can also discuss this in time. I think, building trust will help us to solve some of these complicated issues on the way. At the end, the EU has the right, to veto any customs union agreement, or any member state can veto the negotiated customs union agreement. So why we are blocking it at the beginning now? It's a really lose-lose situation. It is not in the interest of Turkey. It is not in the interest of the EU. So that's my point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that was really helpful also for us to understand. So as we have focused on this usual suspects like migration, like visa liberation issues, etc. This visa liberation also is linked with the 18 March 2016 statement. I know that you mentioned, especially Mr. Ambassador, on that issue and the importance of migration vis-a-vis bilateral relations. So I have a question in this regard. Maybe it will help to enlarge a little bit your thoughts on this issue. So migration has been a priority for both parties, and the EU is focusing on the new pact on migration and asylum. So on the other hand, the agreement between Turkey and EU depends on a joint statement. As statements are not legally binding documents, they tend to be interpreted in accordance with the realities of the current period. So in order for us to understand business community, I think this situation played a role when both sides argued that the other side did not realize the commitments against each other. So with this previous experience, my question is, do you see a chance to revisit and maybe replace this statement with a legal basis? I don't know, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Minister, who would like to start first?
Faruk, this time, no?
Okay, so I can start. You know, as you said, Zeynep Hanım, 18 March statement is not a legally binding document, but it is still a strong commitment by the EU and by Turkey. So, you know, I mean, in very brief terms, 18 March statement includes, you know, 6 points: cooperation on migration, visa liberalization, and readmission agreement. We have update of the customs union. We have the accession negotiations. We have Turkey-EU high-level dialogue, and we have also counterterrorism. You know, the 6 points. You know, when we look at these 6 points, unfortunately, we have not seen very much progress. You know, since 18 March 2016. So, in terms of accession negotiations, we opened 1 chapter. And we were supposed to work on 5 chapters which are politically blocked. But again, no progress has been made. In terms of update of the customs union, again, we discussed previously, so I'm not going to go on you know, into details, but this should have already started. Visa liberalization, of course, the ball is in Turkey's court. Turkey has to fulfill the last 6 remaining benchmarks. But from this point of view, we need a little bit of encouragement. So the EU should not expect Turkey to legislate like Luxembourg in terms of anti-terror policies, because, you know, Turkey is the border of Europe, you know, facing Syria, facing Iran, Iraq, and you know, on the sea we have Libya. So we have to be more vigilant than some of the Central European countries. Now with coronavirus, of course, we do not get any positive signal, because even if we meet the 6 benchmarks right now, I don't know whether we will be able to have, you know, Schengen open to us. So let alone, I mean, of course, when we look at the EU member states, Schengen is now a little bit under strain. So, but this doesn't mean that we should wait. I think fulfilling the 6 benchmarks that we have in front of us would also change, I think, some negative image that we have on Turkey from the EU perspective. So I think EU should still keep on encouraging Turkey to fulfill these 6 benchmarks, and also to be flexible on those areas, for example, counter-terror legislation, you know, more flexible in these areas so that Turkey can make progress. I mean, on this issue, counter-terrorism, I think we need to improve our cooperation. PKK is a terrorist organization, it is fine, but we need to act. We should not allow PKK to recruit people in the streets of EU capitals and make propaganda. And also against Daesh, we have good cooperation, but we need to do more, especially on foreign terrorist fighters, on radicalization, and if necessary, on the integration of Muslims in Europe. And when it comes to Fethullah's terrorist organization, I think today the situation is better understood. We hope much more understanding from our friends. Unfortunately, EU has taken some decisions which are blocking Turkey-EU high-level dialogue meetings and Turkey-EU summits. I think this is not a wise idea. We should immediately, revitalize our, mechanism of meetings through the Association Council, through the high-level dialogue meetings, because this is, I think these are in the best interest of both sides. When it comes to customs union update, we discussed. So then when it comes to migration, there we have 4 main elements. One is one-to-one deal. One-to-one deal was working quite well. And thanks to one-to-one deal, Turkey received 2,600 people, more or less, from the Greek islands. And EU has taken more than 26,000 people. So one-to-one deal was working quite well. The second, dimension of the migration deal was voluntary humanitarian admission scheme. And this scheme has been blocked by some member states. It has never come into practice. But this is important because it shows a legal way to the irregular migrants that they should not try illegal means. And this has not come into practice. The third dimension is the financial assistance, financial support. By the way, not to Turkey, but to the Syrians in Turkey. So many people in the EU think that this money is put in Turkey's budget. It's not given to Turkey, but it is given to the Syrians. So we were hoping that these funds, when we heard 3 plus 3, 6 billion euros in 2016, we hoped that this money would flow fast, within 1 or 2 years, basically. That was the assumption in the minds of Turkish leadership. But since 2016, already 5 years have gone, and only half of this money has been spent, has reached the Syrians. Of course, Christian will tell us how much money was allocated, how much money was contracted. These are all true, by the way. But the thing is that when we look at the figures of Turkey, the EU should take more responsibility and should act fast and should do more. Alone, it costs to Turkey around 40 billion euros so far. So 450 million EU is only talking about 6 billion euros to the Syrians in Turkey. I'm not saying that the EU is not spending any money on other refugees. The EU is also doing a lot in some other parts of the world. But when it comes to the Syrians in Turkey, I think this has to be increased, this has to be accelerated. And then the final dimension of the migration deal was that EU member states and Turkey would work together in northern Syria to encourage the safe return of Syrians and to create livelihoods for Syrians in northern Syria. Unfortunately, this has never been materialized between Turkey and the EU, and this has become more and more important, especially now, because northern Syria has safer than before, and the conflict, in Idlib, has increased. Especially a few months ago, we have seen hundreds and thousands of people trying to, leave Idlib and heading for the Turkish border. Fortunately, today we have contained, the tension in Idlib. I hope we can, continue to keep people at home. But if not, this is an important problem. I think EU and Turkey should also you know, work within Syria, where we have at least, you know, more than 400,000 Syrians who went back to their country, who were in Turkey, thanks to the 3 operations that we have had so far in northern Syria. So, I mean, these are the basic parameters of 18 March. At the introduction that I made, I mentioned that we are talking on the revision of the 18 March statement. These are the issues that we discussed with our Commission friends, but also in addition to this, there are new elements that we have to take into account. As Christian mentioned, the number of Syrians that we had in 2016 was around 2 million. Today we are talking about 3.7 million Syrians. Then we are talking about 500,000 others from Iraq, Iran, you know, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So from Afghanistan, we have 500,000 others in Turkey, and this has not been dealt within the 18 March statement. So Turkey and EU should not only cooperate on the Turkish-Syrian border, but also on the eastern border of Turkey with Iran, for example. And this is becoming more and more urgent. If we need to get, you know, the migration under management by Turkey and by the EU. So, I mean, these are the issues that we convey to our Commission colleagues. And unfortunately, there is again political linkage of, you know, revisiting the 18 March statement with the so-called Cyprus issue. And so we hope that, you know, we can act wisely and quickly, because it might seem that today the migration issue is not a big issue for the rest of Europe because of the coronavirus. But I fear that the migration issue will be multiplied because of the pandemic, because many countries in the Middle East, in Africa, they will suffer the negative impacts of pandemic. This means more unemployment. This means living conditions becoming more, you know, complicated. And this means, of course, more irregular migration towards the west, towards the north. And this will complicate our life maybe within 3-4 months' time. And this will be maybe a bigger wave than we have seen in the past. So we should not wait until the problem comes at our door, but we should act now while we can control the situation, while we can prevent negative impacts of future irregular migration waves. So this is where we are. We hope that we can get some positive answer from the EU side. And of course, Germany is an important country in terms of migration management. And during the German presidency, we hope that this issue can be tackled quickly. But of course, migration is only one of the items which will appear on the German presidency agenda. But of course, we have the multi-annual financial framework, 21-27. So the member states have to agree on it. We have the Brexit. So this is also a complicated issue. We have also the rule of law issue. By the way, rule of law issue is not only related to candidate countries. So we have seen some member states being under, you know, scrutiny of the EU. So Germany will probably pay more attention to this. Then, of course, Green Deal, digitalization will also be, you know, agenda items of the German presidency. But I am hopeful that during the German presidency, we can get, we can make some progress on the, let's say, revision of the 18 March statement to the needs of today.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. The same question is valid for Mr. Ambassador as well. Maybe you can link the the question where Mr. Minister left, during German presidency, what will be the steps that we will take on migration issue, then we can continue with you with the with the EU agenda and German presidency. So then it will be a smooth flow to business topics as well. So please start first the migration and then continue with the EU agenda and German presidency, because we know that on 25th of May, Minister of State Michael Roth announced that the priorities of German presidency will be European Green Deal as a trigger for economic growth, the digital transformation and the preservation of the rule of law in the EU, as Mr. Minister mentioned. So he also mentioned that repairing the EU economy and strengthening the solidarity between its member states. So these are very constructive, although it's a very ambitious goal. So my question on the EU agenda also on this topic is from geopolitical economic perspective. We see that COVID-19 also has contributed in a different level to other countries' economies. So how this will be possible? And is there a chance for Turkey to integrate also in this new EU agenda to deepen the relationship? So please start with the migration and go into the EU agenda. It's a long questions, but you are very smart, so you can resume it. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Yes, I'll start with migration in 2016. I mean, Faruk has already pointed out the main aspects of this statement. Of course, as you said in your introduction, Zeynep, the interpretation about some of these points differ between Turkey and the European Union. And I just give you two examples. One is on the customs union. The statement of 2016 says that the EU and Turkey welcome the ongoing work. It doesn't say complete or whatever. It says welcome the ongoing work. That's what the statement says. And the similar is on visa liberalization. I think the statement says that we will speed up visa liberalization once the benchmarks are met. I mean, Faruk mentioned that there are several benchmarks still outstanding, and we all appreciate the hard work that he is doing with the ministries. And we hope that we will get some suggestions and proposals that would allow the Commission to evaluate this and move forward on this issue. So I'm just saying, you have different readings of some of the points. Where I think we all agree, and that's why the three presidents discussed this on the 9th of March. We all agree. A number of years have gone by since 2016. This is not a legally binding document, as Faruk said. So therefore, it might be worth our while to revisit the document and see where are different interpretations, where are different views, how can we take forward some of the issues where we have concerns. On the implementation, yes, I mean, ever since I arrived here in Turkey, I've been confronted with the point that we are not paying fast enough and whatever enough. I keep responding that this is one of the projects that we are doing worldwide where we are paying with lightning speed actually compared to many other projects, and also to make the point that it's not a matter of how much money that has been paid out or has arrived or where it is supposed to be arriving. It's a matter of what do we do with this money. And I think it's important to note that we have been building 400 schools, that we have been building 2 hospitals, many health clinics, that people are getting every month a stipend on their Kizilay card, which they then spend in the Turkish economy. So these are the important points that I would measure rather than how much money has been paid and reached and so on. I also would like to make the point that the money is not only meant to go to the Syrian community, the money is also meant to go to the hosting community. So we have just added a massive municipal infrastructure program, because we know what the burden is on infrastructures. I've been traveling in Turkey to many places, and I've been confronted in most places where there's a big number of refugees with the point that overnight Additional schools were needed because many kids arrived. Overnight, additional water pipes were needed because more water was consumed. Overnight, the transport system was affected. So I think these are all points that we have taken into consideration by adding now under the second tranche of what we're doing a municipal infrastructure program. So I mean, we all have, may all come with different views and different interpretations. And of course, we are fully, being someone who has been dealing with refugees for the last 30 years in different countries, I know what the burdens are on the communities. I know there's never enough money. I know there's never enough we can do for the refugees themselves and for the communities. Faruk is also very right. The European Union is not only spending money in Turkey, we're spending money in Jordan, in Lebanon. When it comes to the Syrian refugees, we have a big program in central Mediterranean route. We have a big program along the western Mediterranean route. All in all, millions and millions of refugees that are already residing in the European Union that need to be supported as well. So it's a big operation. The European Union is the biggest supporter to UNHCR, to IOM. So I mean, there's a lot of contribution involvement. I understand the country that is most affected, like Turkey, of course, I would like to see more, and there's full appreciation for that. On migration, this is an issue that we worked and cooperated with Turkey before the Syria crisis, and I'm pretty sure we will work and cooperate with Turkey after the Syria crisis, because this is a worldwide phenomenon that will not go away. We just had World Refugee Day last weekend. And UNHCR is now saying we have 75 million refugees around the world. When I started my job in Turkey, it was 62. So in only 4 years, it has gone up dramatically. In addition to the 220 or 230 million internally displaced and other types of migrants that we have around the world. So this is something that we need to stand together, work together, cooperate together. And whatever we can do and also on the eastern border, as Faruk said, I think this is certainly something the EU is very open. And we have programs with the Ministry of Interior at the eastern border. We have programs with the Ministry of Defense at the eastern border and also other borders. So this is certainly something that will, where I think there is willingness in Brussels to improve and to increase this this support. Now, on the other points, moving a bit further on the German presidency and on the European Union agenda for the coming week. I mean, again, you summarized it quite nicely. Green Deal and digitalization, rule of law. I mean, Green Deal, as you may remember, was introduced by Mrs. von der Leyen at her opening speech on the 1st of December last year. The same with digitalization. It's interesting that both aspects that she proposed then are now even more important than they were maybe half a year ago, because of the Corona crisis, because of the need to get out of this economic impact that we have had with all the measures that countries had to take in order to contain the virus. So Green Deal is an opportunity. Now. Is an opportunity for industry. Is an opportunity for business, is an opportunity for developing new ways of working, new ways of dealing in areas like transportation. It's a simple matter. I mean, again, this is nothing new. The European Union has been proposing a lot of initiatives on transport, and I think this now reinforces it, the need to strengthen industry. Same with digitalization. I think a year ago or half a year ago, a conference like we're having now was more the exception to the rule rather than the rule as it is today. So again, a new industry, new processes, new procedures can be explored and can serve as an advantage. On rule of law, again, I don't really need to go into detail. You know, this is one of the key values or the key important points of the European Union. I always keep saying, you know, there is only one point that unites all Europeans. This is not food or culture or languages or whatever. This is that we are in the same space of rule of law, from the north of Finland to the south of Portugal. It's the same space where rule of law rules. And therefore, the point that Faruk made is very important. It's not only here that we talk with our partners or where rule of law is important for candidate countries because they have to subscribe to certain points. It's also internally to make sure, and the Commission President was very clear also in the Corona context, very clear that rule of law is something that we cannot forego, and this is what keeps the European Union together. You also asked a question about the future of the European Union. We have heard all sorts of speculation on the day when the UK voted to get out of the European Union, everything will fall apart, everything is doom and gloom. I don't think so. I mean, what we have seen is that the 27 stuck together, the 27 managed to isolate the problem as it is. It's a legal issue. It's an issue of a state using one article of the founding of the treaties of the European Union, which foresees that a country can get out of the European Union. I think it's very sad to see. It was very sad to see, but it's a legal provision, and a treaty was negotiated that allowed the country to get out, and the treaty is now being negotiated or discussed how the relationship between that country, with the United Kingdom, the European Union will be in the future. I think we need to be rational with this, and we have to make sure that there are no aspects that makes it worse than it needs to be. So I think, and what we have seen after the first criticism about the European Union not responding fast enough to the Corona crisis, we have also seen now in the last few weeks, in the last couple of months, a lot of efforts, a lot of measures taken by the European Union, either financial, political, or legislative or regulatory measures that actually shows that it is very important that the 27 stick together, and of course, in a crisis like this, that is worldwide, also include our close partners like Turkey.
Thank you for the explanation, but I would like to continue with you with the question. Then I would like to Mr. Minister to answer where you left, and plus the question that I'm going to ask now. The conference on the future of the EU that is expected to happen in September, if I'm not mistaken. So is it going to be a cure for nationalistic divides in the EU? If the EU emerges as a stronger union in the near future, would it be willing to fill the global power vacuum? And where Turkey stands in such a framework? Because this is, I think, related with all the comments that you made before. So we have to also draw a picture for the future. So that's why I wanted to continue with you, and then I would like to ask afterwards to Mr. Minister to elaborate on Green Deal and what he sees on the new procedures, new industries, rule of law, and all these issues, together with his own view about the future of Europe and this divide that is existing in EU. But first, start again with you, Mr. Ambassador, and then I'll leave the floor afterwards to Mr. Minister.
Thank you. I think many political observers and commentators will tell you that the European Union is work in progress. It's a project that is evolving. It's not something that was created in 1952 and hasn't changed since then. On the contrary, it has changed and has gone through to many different different waves of treaties over the years, and the treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, but also the Charter on Fundamental Rights says in its, I think, opening lines that we want to see an ever deepening integration of the European countries. I think that's the message here. Now, how you do this, how quick you go, you see different oscillations, different waves. You mentioned the nationalistic discourse. Yes, in the last few years, you saw sort of a resurgence of this. But I think on the 9th of May, when we celebrated the Schuman Declaration, this was a moment to reflect on this. Schuman warned us of this, and he said, nationalism or nationalistic tendencies is always a way to protectionism, is always a way to mistrust. It can also be a way to hatred. I think this is a very strong message, and it came in the middle of the Corona crisis. And I think the Corona crisis, in my view, was also a wake-up call on these issues. That only when there's 27 or the EU, whatever configuration, whenever we stand together, we can overcome a massive crisis like this, and we can get out stronger. So this goes to the next point. Will there be a stronger union, and will be this union playing maybe a stronger role on the world stage? This was certainly the wish of those who wrote the global strategy of the European Union. This is also the wish of the new Commission that entered its new office by making exactly this point, that the Union should be a geostrategic actor and player. It needs various means and tools for that. And I think these means and tools, some of them are there. I mean, global trade, trade tools are one. There are other tools like on security issues that need to be developed more. It started a couple of years ago with a stronger cooperation on defense and security measures, and I'm sure there's much more to do. But as I said, the European Union is evolving and is developing. Now, global power. I mean, the European Union has been a global power, certainly when it comes to trade issues. I mean, it's the biggest union of consumers. It's the second or the third largest economy in the world after the US and China. So it has been, in that respect, it has been a global power. It has been the biggest supporter to multilateral institutions like the United Nations and other institutions, the biggest supporter when it comes to development cooperation around the world. Other countries have reduced their development cooperation. The Union has increased its development cooperation help so there is already a very strong global aspect of what the European Union does. But very often, this is misunderstood and confused with a military or security projection. I think there, obviously, the Union has never wanted to play a strong role. Was always, I think, very, very, very happy with its role as a soft power globally. But I think again that is evolving. And the slogan is, if you want to use a slogan, it's evolving from a soft power to what some observers call a smart power, in the sense that you use your different tools, your different means to also project a global influence of what European values are, because ultimately that is that. Now, Turkey's part in all that, I think Turkey, apart from being a candidate country, is a very close and important partner on the global stage. And many aspects, we differ on some points. We have differences, but I think this is only natural. But we are also very close partners when it comes in upholding, as we said before, multilateralism, where we have very, very similar views on the Middle East, on the two-state solution in Palestine and Israel, on the refugee situation, on migration in general, on supporting on humanitarian assistance. So I mean, Turkey is already part and parcel of this approach as well, and we see also the very important contributions that Turkey can do. Turkey is also part of many of the European structures. I mean, I give you just a simple example, which was relevant during the Corona crisis. Turkey is a partner in the civil protection mechanism. So it's again a two-way cooperation. Turkey could evacuate some of its citizens from Latin America using the civil protection mechanism, while the same way we were cooperating with Turkey in repatriating Europeans from Turkey. So I mean, there is already a very close interaction on many of the aspects that have a projection on the world stage. And my final point on that one, because in my view it's underestimated, Turkey's role in the so-called Astana process, the Syria process. We have always said that we see Turkey as our closest ally in this process, because Turkey and the European Union believe we need to find a political solution in the Syria crisis. There is no military solution. There is no imposed solution. It has to be a political solution. And Turkey has been promoting this. And I think very much also in line what we might differ on other things on Syria, but this is an example where that we think that this cooperation and alliance between Turkey and the European Union is extremely important and useful on world stage. And I'm sure there are many other aspects. I'm sure that Faruk will know many more than I've just mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Militser, so where Mr. Ambassador left, you can take the question, but I want to ask a little bit, two more questions based on his comments. What would be the implications of EU policies such as the Green Deal and digital strategy on Turkey-EU economic relations from our perspective? And do you think these policies will be a new impediment for our trade relations? Because it's a very interesting area. Sometimes some regulations also can be a technical barrier for our industry. So how, what is your perspective on this? And on the future of Europe and the EU's role in the world, I perfectly understand Mr. Ambassador's point, which Europe wants to be as a soft power. So from Turkey's perspective, do you see the EU as a soft power? How would the relations of Turkey and the EU evolve in such an atmosphere? Because Turkey is very close to the dispute area, so we are every time facing problems. So how would you like to comment on this? Please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me start where Christian left in terms of the debate on the future of Europe. You know, Turkey has been, you know, in the past of Europe, and Turkey will also be in the future of Europe. As a candidate country, you know, Turkey has had participated in the past in the convention, you know, to shape today's EU. We hope that we will be also party to this debate on the future of Europe. Recently, the European Parliament has adopted a report on this issue, which did not include the member states. It is sad, but hopefully, somehow, we hope that the candidate countries will be involved in this discussion. But in any case, the Directorate for EU Affairs, we decided that we should have already our own debate on the future of Europe. And we have asked some of the think tanks, NGOs in Turkey to organize this. And we will be actually organizing an event, probably a series of events, where we will discuss, you know, different challenges, different issues, which will directly affect the future of Europe. So when we talk about the future of Europe, of course, there are many issues, you know, from, let's say, you know, trade to common values, from identity to energy supplies to foreign policy, you know, security policy, defense policy, migration, you know, you name it. So, but what I can say is that on all of these issues, Turkey's contribution would be more important than any of the candidate country, even some of the member states. So this is why it is important for the EU to have Turkey on board. And I hope that the EU can do this. And of course, if the EU wants to be a global actor, and if the current Commission is really interested in creating a geopolitical Commission and geopolitical EU, I think one of the most important contributors would be Turkey. So it is. This is why it is so important to revitalize the 18 March statement, which could really pave the way for such a cooperation to create a stronger EU and to create a progressive candidate country, Turkey. So I think we will be hopefully in this debate, and hopefully we will have our own discussions in Turkey, and we will present our conclusions to the EU side and to other European countries. In terms of Green Deal and Digital Action Plan, I would like to say a few words. Of course, the new Commission, as soon as it took the power, they announced a digital program, digital strategy, as well as a Green Deal, which will affect almost all aspects of our life, from trade to logistics, from environment to education. And so I think we have to, I mean, as a candidate country, but also as a European country, we have to closely follow these developments. Otherwise, we will be facing some problems in the future, because if we do not reach the standards that the EU is setting now in terms of green, generation and green Europe, we might have problems. And this is why it is important that also we make progress on environment chapter. We have opened the chapter, but we couldn't close yet. And even the opening of this chapter has been very useful to us, because we brought all the issues, all the EU acquis in terms of climate change, in terms of environmental standards to the Turkish attention. And many public institutions in Turkey, many ministries, they started, following or implementing the EU acquis. And that is very important. So we hope that we can continue to make progress in this area. Again, digitalization will be an important element in the coming years. And actually with the coronavirus, we became more and more digital. And this will have many effects, on our daily life, on our trade. And already, we made some progress in terms of digital trade, in terms of trade without, contact. So we need to work on this. There, let me also underline some of the EU programs that, Turkey participates, such as Horizon 2020, which will become Horizon Europe from 21 on, and also like COSME, EASY. So these sort of programs will also, I think, guide our research institutes, our private sector, and they can all work together to create a green Europe, a digital Europe together. So I invite actually all the private sector, all the think tanks, and all the non-governmental organizations to have a close look at the Horizon Europe in the future, but also other EU programs such as COSME and EASY. And from 2020 on, we have now a board of EU programs, which was created by the Presidency. And now we are trying to probably try to join more EU programs, which can prepare Turkey for accession, but also which can prepare Turkey to have, easy trade, to have easy contact and easy cooperation with the EU institutions and with other European countries. So this is something that we have to follow closely.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It was very useful, and we are very happy to hear that Turkey also will start its own agenda for future of Europe and for the Green Deal, etc. From a business perspective, we also would like to contribute as DEİK in every way possible to your efforts for the future conferences that you are planning to organize. So as an NGO, I think DEİK will have a valuable impact and contribution to that. So in this sense, we are at your disposal anytime you would like to include us. So as we have exceeded our time, it's now 6 o'clock. So I would like to ask two questions from the audience. So one of the participants say that they are one of the biggest stakeholders of Turkish Ministry of Health, serving healthcare informatics, local and worldwide. And he asks whether there will be a new solution, there will be new solutions for health information systems in EU countries in post-COVID period. Mr. Ambassador, this question is for you. So if you like to comment. And also he asked whether, yes, and I think this is one question, then I will continue with the other question.
Thank you. Sorry, Thank you. I'm not sure I can give you a full answer, but all I can tell you is the Commission is now looking at everything under the aspect of resilience and preparedness. So anything that will strengthen our health system in the future, but not only health system, any other system that deals with a crisis situation or with a natural catastrophe or with food scarcity or with similar crisis situation, all these systems we need to be looked at the moment, looked into again at the moment and strengthened. So if that falls under that, I'm sure it will be certainly one of them. Health, of course, is in addition to that because of the corona crisis being a health issue. So exchange of information, better information, digitalization of health information will be certainly at the forefront of what many member states are doing, have already been doing, because in most countries, your health records are already on a digital card. So when you go to a pharmacy, it's already digitalized. So this will certainly continue. And given that we had a very steep learning curve in the last few weeks when it comes to using digital information systems, I'm sure this will add to that. So this will be my comment. Without knowing the immediate details, I would think from a general point of view, you will see far more of this now, and a much stronger also impetus in that. And also, I think the Commission will make also necessary funds available to increase research into all this area.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's noted. Then I have another question. This is for Mr. Minister. Is about PPEs. As many European countries experience problem with regard to PPE orders during the pandemic, is there an authority who deals directly with such issues? As far as I know, the export of PPE was subject to Ministry for Trade approval, but I don't know really in detail. So, Mr. Minister, would you like to elaborate on this?
Yes, of course. In the first days of the crisis, of course, many countries have taken unilateral decisions so that export of, personal medical stuff should go through some sort of, permission procedure. This has also been the case in the EU countries, but also in Turkey. And of course, luckily, Turkey was one of the rare countries which had the capacity to export. And of course, when we have 82 million people, first we have to give our priority to our own people. But as soon as we have reached certain levels of production in different products, from masks to, PPEs, even, ventilators and other equipments, we decided to be more flexible. Every day, actually, the Ministry of Health, in coordination with the Ministry of Trade, they're updating the number of, the volume of export which can be permitted. As far as I know, for several PPE products, if you produce, for example, 1/3 for the country, you can export 2/3, but depending on the products. So I do not know exactly as of today, the ratio in different products, but I think we are today much more flexible than we used to be in the first few weeks of the crisis. So we already started exporting different medical products to different countries, but also we have donated many, products to many countries since we had the capacity to produce quickly and with good quality.
Thank you. In the meantime, while you were responding last question, we have received another question, and this is the last one. One of our participants asked that how would the pandemic and public health concerns will affect visa regulations of the EU? This is a question for Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. Let me, if you allow me, one sentence on PPE. This was also one of the points that the European Commission, and together with the other institutions and the member states, got very active at the beginning, because we saw the need to launch a massive procurement program on PPE, and now it goes one step further. It's also preparing for the future. It's procurement and stockpiling. So we will have, hopefully, if there's another wave or another need for these things, we will have the necessary capacities. Faruk is absolutely right. Various countries had various needs and had to take care of their national sort of demands. And what we did in cooperation with the Turkish Ministry of Health and the Turkish Ministry of Trade, we tried to sort out these problems, because we did not want to affect the credibility, reliability of the trade links between Turkey and the European. I think we managed. I think we managed with the help of all these ministries' concerns, because we didn't want to have a long-lasting impact on this trade relationship. So I think we have overcome this with the cooperation of the two ministries. Now on visas, I don't really know what the impact should be. All I can tell you on visa liberalization, there's a general trend to be very restrictive and very cautious. Many countries have requested visa liberalization, and on some of this, we have been discussing this for quite some time. I see an issue when it comes to the immediate sort of decision to close a border or to close borders, as we have done in the last few weeks. But this has nothing to do with visa itself. It has to do with travel. So when you look at the decision of the European Commission, which is valid until the 1st of July, to close the outer borders of the European Union, this is not a visa-related issue. This is a general issue, where of course a number of exceptions are also listed in people who can come into the European Union. So I would not see a direct link between Corona and visas, with a one very broad and general exception, that a situation like this, where travel worldwide has been restricted, of course has an impact on processes that in the end will grant visa liberalizations on a grand scale. So that I can see, but this is nothing concrete, I can tell you. So and I've had this question before by other people. I don't see a direct link.
Directly. Okay, so I think this was the last question, and the time is 18:11. So I would like to conclude with this webinar. I believe that we had an insightful and thought-provoking discussion. So it always gives us a pleasure to host our Minister Kaymakçı and Mr. Ambassador. So I would like to thank you all for participating, and I also would like to extend really my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Minister and Ambassador for sharing their insights with us. It was very useful for us to understand the bigger context, also some policy-making issues as well. So COVID-19 is a big stress test for the world. We all agree on that. And everybody says that the world will never be the same, so we will see by living through it whether this is true or not. But as Mr. Ambassador mentioned, we need resilience and preparedness at all levels. So this is really important. And as Winston Churchill once said, we should never waste a good crisis. So this is why, as Mr. Minister has indicated, that contributing to Europe's future will be beneficial for both sides. So we as Turkey and the Turkish Business Committee are always, happy to contribute on the future discussions. And we have been talking about a new normal. So although we don't know how this new normal will be, I think what Turkey and the EU need is a better normal. And so continuing discussion and, keeping the dialogue open, it's very critical. And as Mr. Minister said, we should work more on the win-win situations and keeping the trust alive. So this is very critical. I hope we will come out of this crisis, both sides stronger and more integrated. This is our hope as business community. For this, we have to talk as I mentioned, more and less, more about the issues and the subjects and the future, less about each other. I think this is very important. But we, as Turkish business community, looking always for possibilities rather than problems, we are very much committed to do this. So if there is any part from our side to take to play a role in this context, we are ready. This is valid for our own government and for the Mr. Ambassador for the Europe. So thank you for listening, and I hope everybody benefited from this fruitful dialogue between Turkey and the EU. So I really wish all the best for you, Mr. Ambassador, for the future. So we will miss you, but I think you will come and see us every time. And we will meet hopefully in the future in other platforms, and we are looking forward to work together also with the new ambassador who will take your place. And I think Mr. Minister would like to add something, so please.
Very, very briefly, you know, you thanked Christian at the beginning of your speech. And I want to thank him at the end of our webinar, you know, in front of all the Turkish business community. I don't know whether he will have time to see you in Istanbul. He might be leaving soon. It is sad for us, but he has really contributed a lot to Turkey-EU relations and the weight and importance of Turkey in Europe. I am sure he will continue to do so in his new function that we can announce. It was already in the media. So he's going to Cairo. I think from there, he can tell us how European Turkey is, you know, when you look at from the East. And we wish him, you know, all the success and all the best in his new function, and also to his charming wife and family. All the best.
Thank you very much, Faruk.
Thank you, the DEİK, for this very useful webinar.
Thank you. And with this final remarks, I would like to conclude the meeting. And thank you to all and to our guests who were listening us. We had almost 175 people listening us from different countries as well. So hope to see you again in another platform. And thank you for your valuable time. And good luck also for the future. Thank you. And I conclude the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Zeynep. Thanks, Faruk. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.